to solve these rational equations, our first step again was to factor. We want to know what the factors of this expression look like, so we know the multiplying pieces. Okay, so here the two numbers that multiply to negative 40 have a difference of 3. That's going to be x minus 8, x plus 5. That's going to be equal to x minus 1 over two numbers that multiply to 8 and add to negative 9 are going to be negative 8, negative 1. Okay, so the first things first, we should state our restrictions. Okay, the restrictions come from the denominator, so x cannot be equal to, looks like here 1, positive 8, negative 5. Okay, so those are our three restrictions. So the next thing we could do is we could clear out the denominator, but we should always simplify fractions when possible. Okay, so if we've already stated our restrictions, we can start canceling factors out. And in fact, we have an x minus 1 and an x minus 1 factor on top and bottom. Well, that's a times x minus 1. That's a divide x minus 1. They will undo each other. And in doing so, notice what happens is we end up with a simpler lowest common denominator. And that's advantageous because if we don't do this, we end up with an equation that is a degree higher than what we really want. And in fact, we will end up with extraneous solutions. Okay? So if you don't do this, it's not that you can't solve it, but you make more work for yourself. So before you solve, and just the same with adding and subtracting, before you solve or before you add and subtract fractions, you should see if you can simplify the fraction. Okay? If you have common factors that cancel out. So here now I can, when I state the lowest common denominator, so my lowest common denominator, instead of having 3 factors, okay, we have 2 because we have a share in x minus 8. We have an x plus 5, so the lowest common denominator is just x minus 8, x plus 5. Okay, so there's my lowest common denominator. And when I multiply through by my lowest common denominator, okay, so I'm going to multiply by x minus 8, x plus 5. Just going to move this over so it's not so crowded in there. Okay, when I multiply by x minus 8, x plus 5. I had that wrong anyway, so we need x plus 5 there. When I multiply the first fraction, we have x minus 8 canceling the x minus 8 here. We have times x plus 5 divided by x plus 5. They both cancel out, so we end up with just 15. Okay. On the right hand side, the x minus 8's cancel out. Okay, so we had the 1 there, and then we're going to multiply by x plus 5. So notice that we have, this is a linear equation, degree 1. So we do not have a quadratic equation. If we had kept the x minus 1 in there, we would have ended up with a quadratic equation, which is still solvable, but it just makes things more complicated than they need to be. So when possible, you should simplify your fractions. Okay, cancel out factors to simplify the fraction. So the last step then is, I'm just going to multiply that out. Well, I don't need to multiply that out. I can just subtract 5 from both sides, and I end up with my solution of x equals 10. Okay, so there it is. And I don't have to worry about extraneous solutions here because I've gotten rid of that extraneous solution. We only have the linear solution to worry about. Okay, so we can check this by graphing. So when we graph this, okay, you can take a look at the graph and see what it looks like. Now the point of graphing is we just want to start getting familiar with the graphs, because these graphs are relatively new, and we want to start getting better at analyzing because they are new and they do look a little bit more complicated. They're harder to understand unless you start recognizing the pieces of the graph and how these graphs behave.